and you're watching Dukascopy TV. This week's markets have been full of action. With me in the studio to discuss it all is John Hancock. John, welcome back to the studio.
Nice to be here.
Lovely to see you as always. Now, we've had the equity highs, we've had the slump, we've had no volatility complaints, then all of a sudden too much volatility. But how would you describe market sentiment at present, John?
I think we've probably gone from a world of irrational exuberance to irrational pessimism in a way. I mean, it's very easy in hindsight to look at the causes of this slump and to say, well, you know, it's the Ebola fears, it's signs that Europe may be slipping back into recession, it's the geopolitical uncertainty, whether in Asia or in Russia-Ukraine relations. All that's very easy in hindsight, but of course, a lot of those things existed during the exuberant phase as well. I mean, when the stock markets were soaring in August and September, you know, Ukraine and Russia looked like they were about to go to war. So I think in hindsight, hindsight's 2020. In reality, we're dealing with very much an emotional reaction, and right now we seem to be, in my opinion, erring on the side of pessimism.
It does seem as though maybe it's getting towards the winter months and people are just, you know, not very happy in the slightest. But would you say, just to tease out those topics that you mentioned, is it really the political or the economical side which is having the most impact at present?
I'd have to say that it's the political side, because if you look at the fundamentals of the economy, including, you know, the American economy, less so the European economy. Let's just take one example. You know, a lot of bears cite the declining or worse than declining price of oil as a cause of these market jitters. And of course, that's a two-sided phenomenon as well. For oil production and jobs associated with oil and profits associated with oil, this isn't particularly a good thing. But if you're looking at the wider economy, you know, cheaper prices at the pump, lower energy costs, more money in people's pockets for consumer spending, this is actually a good news story, and especially as the United States emerges as this major energy producing power. So what is being interpreted as bad economic news right now could very just as easily be interpreted as good economic news, especially in the long term. It's the political environment that I think is particularly worrying to people. This sense that we're living in an age of deep uncertainty. Roger Cohen had a piece in The Columnist in the New York Times, had a column the other day where he talked about the great unraveling. Everything seems to be unraveling. U.S. leadership is absent or at least in retreat. Scotland just had a near miss on independence from the UK. Separatist movements are flourishing in Europe. The G20 seems to lack traction. The multilateral trading system is paralyzed. IMF reform is stalled. The UN, as usual, seems powerless to influence these events. We seem to be living in an age of uncertainty, of unraveling, of anxiety. And this anxiety may be below the surface and not immediately visible in markets, but when something triggers the fear instinct, it happens very quickly.
Indeed. I mean, it seems as though people are not happy with the status quo, but they don't like the uncertainty, they don't enjoy the feeling of, you know, what is next. They kind of also, they don't like the unknown a little bit as well and draw back. But what do you think of especially that we've had the IMF and the G20 kind of comments, meetings, etc., saying that perhaps a crisis is looming? Do you think that we're on the brink of that again?
Well, you know, there's that great American aphorism, nobody knows nothing. And I think in some sense it's kind of true now more than ever. You know, we celebrate the fact that we live in a world of disruption, of churn, of seismic global geopolitical and economic changes. A lot of it driven by the free markets we're talking about, the capitalist system we're talking about, the wave of creative destruction. And our policymakers want to project the sense that they have this under control. The G20 is going to stimulate growth, or the IMF is going to put a floor underneath, you know, whether it's the recent global financial crisis, or they're going to, you know, help underpin the nascent recovery. In fact, they're not in charge. we live in a world where no one's in charge. That's the definition of free markets. In a way, that's the definition of globalization. It's not the centralization of power, it's the decentralization of power. It's millions, if not billions, of consumers every day exercising their vote with their dollars and their yen and their euros. No one's in control, and nobody knows nothing. When you hear the G20 say we're going to coordinate the objective of 2% global growth, take that with a big pinch of salt. They're not in control.
Well, that's the next point I was wanting to make. What ammunition do these big players, so to speak, have left in their quivers? Doesn't seem to be too huge, or it seems to be few and far between, to be honest.
Well, that's a very good point. Look, Monica, we went through a period right up into the U.S. financial crisis till 2007, 2008, what we euphemistically called the Great Moderation. We had solved all the problems. We had solved inflation. We had solved the growth conundrum. We even seemed to have solved the development conundrum. China was surging. India even seemed to be catching up. Africa was clocking great growth rates. The technocrats in places like WTO, IMF, World Bank thought they had it under control. They thought they knew the secret recipe for growth. And that's come to an end. We're having big doubts, not just about the economics profession, not just about their role in forecasting, but the idea that you can, the conceit that you can micromanage an economy, that you can control globalization. So I think, in a sense, all that they've tried to do, this point you make of their, a quiver being full and a quiver now being empty, might have been counterproductive. They gave the impression that they could actually do something about it, and then when it didn't materialize, they created the impression of powerlessness or weakness, or that they exhausted all of their ammunition. Maybe that's a good thing that it's exhausted. Maybe it's going to be the underlying forces of the structural trends we see: innovation, freer trade, consumer opinion, that's going to make the difference in whether this economy holds or whether the recovery has traction, not the ECB or the Fed. If we rely too much on the technocrats, if the markets are reliant too much on the stimulus of monetary policy or fiscal policy, I think it creates a false illusion.
Indeed. The point to take is nobody knows nothing. I like that. It's kind of bleak, but it's true. And you see the other hand when Germany, for example, are getting criticism for supposedly putting their head in the sand. But if you keep on just fueling the fire with these so-called tools, it doesn't seem to be working. Quantitative easing, the effectiveness, for example, who knows? How can it be measured?
Well, you're right, Monica, and I think in a sense we ourselves as individuals are conflicted. We, in a sense, are driving this juggernaut. We like to, we live in an age where everyone likes to blame the elites. It's Obama's fault, it's Brussels' fault, and the Scottish independence fault, it's London's fault, it's David Cameron. But in fact, we've never been more empowered. Every day we exercise our franchise. We get on Amazon.com and click our way to the book we want. We Facebook-like products and performances and celebrities. Every day, you and I are exercising an extraordinary degree of economic power. And personally, I think that's a good thing. I think in a way what's most hopeful about our modern age is precisely this decentralization of power, this initiative that's shifted to the individual. We live in a highly individualistic age, but that doesn't mean we're not human. Deep down, we like the idea somehow that someone's in charge. And we certainly like scapegoats. We like someone to blame when things aren't going our way.
That's absolutely. We all like to have someone to make everything right, but point the finger when it doesn't quite get tied up with a little bow. But John, as always, it's a pleasure to have you in and chew the fat with you and to really just get into the discussion points of things. So thank you very much for coming in again.
Thanks for having me, Monica.
Thank you. Okay, well that's all from John and myself for another episode here at the Dukascopy TV studio. But make sure you keep clicking back. Goodbye for now.